our next speaker. Our next speaker has passion, has spirit, is the boy version of me. That's what I always tell him. I was very honored to be part of the first re-entry Toastmasters in Washington State. I mean, it's a big, big deal. The first re-entry Toastmasters in Washington State. Huge shout out to Alex Mayo, David Heppard, and CJ Purser. They started that for guys who are on the inside doing Toastmasters. So when they transition out, they have a facility somewhere to go to, and it's called the Inside Out Toastmasters. So you have a hub to come to when you get out. It's very, very special to us, and I get to be part of it as well, I think. So, with further ado, David Heppard, please come up here.
I'm Karen with your introductions. She's building you up. It's easy to fall down for them pedestals, right? You know, how's everybody doing? My name is David Heppard. I think what's important to know is maybe a little bit about my story so you can understand it a little bit better. Can you hear me? Is that there yet? All right. I like to say that people who make decisions that send them to the penitentiary are usually steeped in their trauma, and I was no different. I was young, dealt with a lot of trauma. I gravitated toward gang culture, and at 16 years old, they threw me away, like quite literally. They gave me 60 years. Exceptional sentence. It was the early 90s, adult time for adult crime, and Hillary Clinton was calling us super predators. And that think really informed people on how they passed their laws, and so they threw me away. And you know, I'm 16, and emotionally that feels away, but I couldn't really capture what was really happening. I couldn't really capture that when I was 16, and they gave me the time. They're giving me my sentence, and they do them in months. It's not like in juvenile where they talk about weeks. They do them in months, and so he's saying 200 and such months, plus this many months, and such. And I asked my lawyer how much time it was, and he wrote 60 on a piece of paper and just slid it to me. And I'm like, wow, right? And so I came from gang culture, and so when I went into the penitentiary, there was an older school cat. He told me, he said, listen, you have a choice. You either go to the penitentiary, you're either going to be a sheep or you're going to be a wolf. Sheep get eaten, wolves get respected. Choose wisely, right? Now, I'm a 16-year-old impressionable child. At the time, I thought I was grown until I grew up and saw a 16-year-old. And then I realized how grown I wasn't. And so when I went to the penitentiary, I continued my behavior. I acted up, I acted out, I was hyper-aggressive, because in my mind, everything was life or death. I was 16, 140 pounds, 5'10". I wasn't grown in no form or fashion. There's no way to really wrap your head around the fact like I was grown. They threw me in there. Back then, they didn't have youth offender programs, so I went straight into the institution, Clallam Bay, and I had to deal with what I had to deal with, and so it was what it was, and it was hella violent. I got into a lot of fights. I did a lot of hold time, and years later, after I'm doing this and surviving this, a couple came in, a couple volunteers came into the institution and showed me empathy. Like just showed me empathy. Like really, they're in there, it was a Christian organization, but they didn't push the Bible, they didn't push Christianity, they were just gave me empathy. Like really saw me. Like for the first time in my life. Because the reality is my whole life I've never had empathy. I didn't know what it looked like. I'd never seen a healthy relationship. I didn't understand. I had no reference point. And so at first I was, looking for the strings attached. And I'm looking for them. I'm looking for the ulterior motives. And when I couldn't find it, what ended up happening, it was transformative for me. It was transformative for me because you can't unsee empathy. Once you feel it and once you see it, it has a way of changing your worldview. Because the reason I was able to justify my bad behavior is because I thought the world was a bad place. The reason why I was able to do what I did is because I thought they would do it to me. And so in that space and time when I was able to actually feel empathy, and they really showed it to me, and they stayed in contact with me. They used to send me pictures of their vacations. It was like they really cared about me. This random individual who gang affiliated, stuck in the penitentiary for the rest of his life, right? And that was transformative for me. And from there, I had the space to really be able to make adjustments in my life. And so what I started to do they wouldn't let me take any programming or anything, no AA programs. I had too much time. And so what ended up happening is I started self-educating myself. And through that process, I started mentoring guys. And I was mentoring some guys that were in AA programs. And this process was big for me because now I had value. And to feel like I have value to give was what was really missing because I didn't think I had value. And so I thought I was a throwaway, and I moved like that. I approached the world like that. And from that point, I started doing everything I can. I was on a positive track, and I was trying to build. I realized that I can have value even if I was never going home, even if I had to spend the rest of my life in this box. It was what it was, but I had value to give. So I'm helping people with their reentry plans. I'm helping people unpack that stuff that, I had to unpack. All that trauma that we're dealing with and navigating through these circumstances. And so that's what I ended up doing. And in 2014, they started to have the juvenile laws, the research came out. And then they passed the law in 2014, the 5064 bill. And what it says is after 20 years, if you're convicted as a juvenile, you can petition for your release. And so I was given the opportunity to petition. And I did petition. They gave you psych evaluations. They needed to make sure, there were assessments to make sure that it wasn't a gimmick, it wasn't a gag, that was who I truly was and my change was real. And it was real because I changed 15, 16 years before that, right? When I wasn't going home. I didn't think there was an end release date. I just wanted to be of value. That's it. And so I was granted my release. And it was a blessing. And I also took Freedom Projects, NVC, and mindfulness classes while I was incarcerated. And I talked to the co-founder and he wanted me to volunteer with the organization upon my release. And I did volunteer. I volunteered when I got released. I was working another job. I was busting it, and I was also trying to volunteer. And then they hired me part-time to do social media, which is, just think about that. I was gone for 24 years. From 16 to 41. I didn't know anything about social media, but I knew marketing because I studied business and marketing my whole time down. And they saw that I was the right person, even if I didn't know the technical aspects of navigating Twitter or Facebook. I can YouTube that. And they felt the same way. And they hired me for it. And then they gave me a promotion to marketing director and marketing director and reentry coordinator. We built up the Safe Returns program, and we did a lot of other great things. And now they've blessed me with the opportunity to be the executive director. And so this is big. Which is big for me because this is a program that I took on the inside, and I seen the great work that they were doing, and to be able to be a part of it is big for me, to be able to give this stuff back. But I really want to leave with this, though. One of the last barriers for my change was the stigma. And I need to really explain how bad this is. People don't change just because they don't have resources or nothing else, or the right person hasn't talked to them. The reality is there's a stigma. And that stigma keeps more people from changing than anything else. The reality is I wanted to be a better person. I wanted difference in my life. I wanted to make adjustments, but I always bumped up against, will it matter if I am, though? Will it matter if you still won't give me a job, won't live next door to me, won't, you know what I mean? That sat with me, and it sits on my spirit, and I go back inside, and that sits on them too. When you see a person light in his change, and he's quick to backtrack, that's because he already believes that, and everybody's telling him that you ain't got a shout out there, they're not gonna hire you, this is gonna happen. So after the 10th no, you can't be surprised if they backtrack. You can't be surprised if they don't get housing after 5 or 6 places, won't give you a spot to live, and they backtrack. They don't do it because they want to. I promise you, nobody enjoys crime. I promise you that. Nobody does. They're in their trauma. You know what I mean? And the reality is, if you can do for them as what somebody did for me and see my humanity in the moment, and see that if you give empathy to this young gang member, that it might transform his life and affect a lot of other people's lives. You know what I'm saying? Hopefully that other people can follow suit. So with that being said, I appreciate the time. I appreciate the space. And let me welcome up Karen back. Thank you.
after that. Thank you, David.
Oh, it's the cut.